Okay, so today in section 2, we're going to be talking about how do you solve a one-step equation. Okay. Now, again, to solve it, what we're going to be doing is we're looking for a value for x. And most of the time there's just one answer for x. Later this year, we'll find solutions or equations that have more than one solution to a problem. If you would like to solve it, okay, if you're going to solve a crime, you're like, let's figure it out. We're trying to find out all the numerical values, okay, all the answers that make the equation true. So, like, think about this. If I said, I'm thinking of a number that you add 1 to it and you get 10, the only answer that you could plug into that problem would be, for example, 9. Okay. Another thing that I could talk about, and I think you could do this, if I said a number squared plus 1 equals 4. Actually, that's not before, that's about 5. And one of the answers could be 2. Okay, because 2 squared is 4. 4 plus 1 is 5. Another answer actually is -2. Why? Because if you tried -2 times -2, you get 4, and 4 plus 1 does give you 5. So they would have 2 solutions to that problem. And we'll get into that when you're a little older. Each value that makes it an equation true is called a solution. And also equivalent equations have the same solution. That's kind of something we'll get to later on. I'll tell you what I mean. They're trying to be a little fancy when they say those words. But I will tell you that if you have an equation like 2x plus 4x plus 1 is equal to 25. And if you combine these like terms, you say, oh, 6x plus 1 equals 25. Those would both have the same solution, the top one of them, because they're just simplified forms of the same equation. They're equal to each other. It's just one's more simplified than the other. So I want you to think, hey, if you've got two equations that are basically equivalent, just one simplified, they're going to have the same answer. And we use like steps that are true to help us solve problems. And so they're just trying to say, hi, when we solve things, we're not changing things up to make them different. We're keeping them having the same solution. Okay, the first thing you can do is if you have an equation, you're allowed to add the same number to both sides of the equation, and it will still be an equivalent equation. And if you start with an equation, you're like, I want to subtract the same number from both sides. You're allowed to, as long as you do it once to each side. Okay. And so you guys have solved equations, nothing really new, but you're allowed to start with an equation and minus the same value from both sides of the equation, as long as you just do it once to each side. Can't do it twice to one side or just to one side, but not the other. You've got to do it to both of them. Okay. So the thing is, if you're trying to get x alone, okay, you're going to use inverse operations to help you isolate the x term. And so notice if I'm trying to make x alone, it says subtract 7. The opposite of subtracting 7 is to add 7. Okay, so that's an inverse operation. We're going to deal with inverse operations this year. So you're going to add 7 to both sides. And I don't know if Miss Curtis had you guys like draw lines. You're like, you have to do it once to each side, but you do have to do it not twice to one side and once the other, or just you got to do it once to each side. And if you know your math, -7 plus 7 is 0 on the left side. So you get x, and then that 0 equals, and 14 plus 7 is 21. And so if we're trying to say what answer makes this true, well, if x is 21, then you're going to have a problem that makes it true. So if you wanted to, you could try it in the top of the equation and say, if I take 21 and you minus 7, do you get 14? And the answer is yes, I do. And so your solution should work. And how you get it is to isolate x. And how else you do it is On the second one, you'll notice there is an x and there's a subtract 2. So what's the inverse of subtracting 2? Well, is to add 2. And as long as you do it once to each side of the equation, then you're going to get x, and then negative 2 plus 2 is 0. And that negative 9 plus 2 is negative 7. So that's the solution to that problem. And so I think the big thing is, if you're looking to get x alone, to be like, what is x equal to? Well, you're going to isolate it by looking what's next to the x and saying, how is that value related to the x? In this case, it's subtracted, so you're going to add 1 to both sides. And again, you do it once to each side of the problem. And on the left, you get 0. On the right, you get, that is cute, 0. And on the right, you get an x. And so x equals 0. You can rewrite it if you want to. X equals 0. All right, let's keep going. We're going to minus 13 for both sides because it is plus to 13. Yeah, x, you draw that vertical line for the equation, x is equal to 7. In this case, to get x alone, there's a 8 next to it, and adding 8, we're going to minus 8 from both sides. Look in front of it, it's a positive 8. And the last one on the side, I want x alone. Notice it's plus 5. So we're going to minus 5. Look in front of the term that you're trying to get rid of. Do the opposite. Okay, if it's added, you subtract. If it's multiplied, you divide. And vice and all the other pieces. So this would be negative 15 equals. Make sure bring down the x. And there you go. All right, let's try a word problem. This one has a lot of words. I was reading this earlier today. I was like, wow, there's a lot of words in this one. Okay. A male bulldog. Okay. So we're going to write B for bulldog. Okay. A male bulldog weighs, okay, basically equals. His weight equals, okay, 15 pounds less than a male golden retriever. So I'm going to call this G. Notice less than means you reverse these two things. So it's going to be golden retriever minus 15. And you're like, well, that is exciting. They tell us that the average male bulldog weighs 50 pounds. Okay, so how can that help us? We know this is 50. We want to find the weight of a golden retriever. So we're going to solve this for G. So to get G by itself, we're going to add 15 both sides because it is actually subtracted. So you get 65 equals G. So a golden retriever is 65 pounds. Another thing you can do to both sides of an equation is if you start with an equation, you can times both sides by the same number. Should be like C, times both sides by C. You can also, you start with an equation, you can divide both sides by the same number. The exception is you can't divide by 0, okay? So let's try doing these questions here, and then we got one word question. So if you look to try to solve for x, you'll notice it's divided by negative 4. And so if you're the inverse of dividing by negative 4 is to times by negative 4. And if you recall, if you got a number over itself, it cancels out. So negative 4 divided by negative 4 is actually 1. If you try your calculator, that'll give you that. If you times by the right side the same number, again, if you do it to one side, you got to do it to the other, you get x equals 40. The next one says x divided by 7. To get rid of divided by 7, you're going to times both sides by 7. 7 over 7 is 1. If you times the left side by 7, you get x. If you times the right side by 7, you get 7. Okay, this next one has a negative 5 on the coefficient. So if you multiply both sides by negative 5, if you do it in your calculator, negative 5 over negative 5, that makes a positive 1. Okay, so we're getting 1x. If you do it to the left, you got to do it to the right. you get negative 30. All right. What we're going to do next is we're going to get rid of this fractional coefficient. To get rid of a fractional coefficient, you multiply by the reciprocal. And if you times the top and times the bottom, you're going to get 15 over 15x. That's just 1x. Okay. On the right-hand side, if you times it by 5/3, if you have a calc that does fractions, great. Times 15 by 5/3. If you don't have one that multiplies fractions, you're going to times the top, and you're going to get 75. You're going to times the bottom, you get 3. And then you're going to do top divided by bottom. So again, times the top, times the bottom. You get 75 divided by 3, which is 25. If you did have a calc that did fractions, you could multiply these two together. Okay, so 3x means 3 times x. How do you get rid of the 3? We're going to divide it by it. Why? Because 3 over 3 is 1, and x is equal to 6. To get rid of this negative 2 is times by x, so divide by negative 2. With multiplication division, you multiply or divide by the same value. Okay, so there's times by negative 2, you divide both sides by negative 2. Okay, to get rid of this one here, if there's just a negative x, you can divide both sides by negative 1. Okay. And this last one, we're going to divide both sides by 10 because 10 over 10 is 1. And x is equal to, if you reduce this fraction, you can divide top and bottom by 2. You get 1/5. Okay, Presley is making costumes. She spent this much money on 21 yards of fabric. We're going to figure out how much she paid for every single yard of fabric. So Presley, she had 21 yards. Okay, so 21 yards at a certain price. And she spent was 146.58. It was 21 every yard, or 21 yards of fabric. And so if you want to figure out how much she paid for it each, okay, if that's the total, we're going to divide both sides by 21. Okay, and I'm going to grab my calculator because I can't do that in my head. So let's try 146.58 divided by 21, and you get y is equal to 6.98. So that's how much money she spent per yard. That should be spelled better. All right, well, thank you so very much. I hope you have a good day.